$687.7 million recognizes the various challenges the library faces and that you are committed to the efficient use of the resources available to you. I look forward to your testimony. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Lowy. And Dr. Hayden, now we turn to you. Your statements, as well as the statements of the Acting Register of Copyrights and the Director of Congressional Research Service, have been provided for the members of the committee, and they will be spread across the record. And we now turn to you to summarize your statement and address the committee.
Well, thank you, Chairman Yoder, Ranking Member Ryan, members of the subcommittee, and Mrs. Lowy for having me here today and giving me an opportunity to provide testimony in support of the library's 2018 budget. And it is in my 8 year, I have a few more years ago, 8 months. I did, 8 months into my tenure. I continue to be inspired by the breadth of the collections, the services, and also working with the staff members of the Library of Congress. There, we did an estimate of their collective tenure, and it goes to 80,000 years of combined expertise and special services. And so today, the library holds more than 162 million items in over 470 languages, and it is the world's largest collection of materials and is recognized as such. Last year, we did greet and serve nearly 1.8 million visitors, with 93 million visits to the website, and the Copyright Office registered more than 400,000 claims. We also took 10 million preservation actions on the collections, and we responded to over 1 million reference questions from Congress, the public, and other federal agencies. I would like to express my sincere support, and I know I speak for the entire staff, for your support for the FY17 funding. It will allow us to implement modernization, IT modernization, that will propel the library forward in many ways, strengthen our ability to serve Congress, and also to make sure that we have the most modern and efficient copyright process, and also making sure that our collections are preserved. A modernized library growing in reputation, and the Library of Congress's reputation is worldwide and well known. Our budget request reflects our priorities in terms of expanding our access to Congress and to the public, as well as being good stewards of our physical collections and making sure that we have a technology infrastructure that supports all of our efforts. One of the first things we did this year was to strengthen our oversight and management internally. And I was very pleased, and I have to say that the Government Accountability report provided a blueprint for IT modernization. And I've been working very closely with Mr. Barton. In fact, he reports directly to me, and we meet weekly to make sure that we act on the GAO recommendations, and that we are building an infrastructure that will support Copyright Office, CRS, and our other specialized services. Also, the Director of Strategic Planning and Management now reports directly to me as well, so that all of our planning and management efforts are aligned. Our request, as you mentioned, is 38% additional over last year, and IT modernization is the primary focus of my efforts and our request. The stewardship of the physical collections is not just a storage aspect, but it's also preserving our collections. We have multi-format collections, and there are many ways that we can preserve and conserve those efforts. In closing, the modernized information technology, being good stewards of our collections, and also making sure that our unique workforce, the expertise that I mentioned earlier, continues into the future is a major focus of this budget request. I forward to opening up to questions and getting into more specifics with Mr. Newlen and Mr. Barton here.
Thank you for your testimony this afternoon. We'll now turn to questions, and I'll begin, and then we'll go through the other members of the committee. In May 2015, the GAO made 31 public recommendations to improve the library's management of IT. Could you just briefly, I've sort of got them before me, and we could probably talk about them for days, but can you briefly just summarize sort of where you are on these and how we're doing addressing these recommendations?
I'm smiling because I can report that just this morning, 3 of the 31 recommendations were closed for that report that gave us the blueprint. Yes, the document that you have and that we've been working on, I mentioned working with Mr. Barton directly. I received a full report from GAO last week, and they, even though it takes about a year to close out one of the recommendations, they're very pleased that the remaining, and there are 2 others that have been closed already, so it's a total of 5 out of the 31 that have been closed so far. And this morning, I must say, we did celebrate a little bit, that most of the other recommendations, including making sure that the library had shared services across its infrastructure. That was part of my effort to centralize all IT efforts in the library, are leading to at least 30 to 40% of the remaining recommendations. That's a completion rate for the rest, and they are on track to be closed out in the estimated time that had originally been scheduled. We're looking at and working on some other adjustments to the scheduling of the closeouts. However, they seem very pleased and were very complimentary of Mr. Barton and his staff. They meet with them every week to go over the recommendations. So this is a success story in terms of having that GAO report as a blueprint and a way that we can go forward. Mr. Barton, if you want to add anything to it.
I would just add that the staff across the library and all of the IT departments that are working on the recommendations from GAO have proven to be very dedicated, very committed to advancing the mission of the library, and it's been very successful so far. As Dr. Hayden mentioned, the weekly meetings that we have with the GAO have been very productive. It's been a little bit of a learning experience for us on the requirements to close out recommendations, but we're making significant progress. And I expect we'll have most of these recommendations closed out in very short order.
Okay, thank you for your report there. Earlier this month, we heard testimony regarding making the Copyright Office autonomous. I'm sure you have some thoughts on this, but it was stated in the hearing that the Patent and Trademark Office can process about 500,000 recordations on an annual basis with 10 to 12 people. They can have them online for people to see within 24 to 48 hours. It's also stated the Copyright Office has the same amount of people, can process about 11,000 recordations, and it takes 18 months to process. Do you agree with that assertion, and what do you think the contributing factors are on the difference between the Patent and Trademark Office and Copyright Office are in terms of the number of records being processed and the timeliness of the processing? 24 hours versus 18 months is a pretty big difference.
IT modernization system-wide for the library includes a concentration on the 2 major specialized units, copyright, and CRS actually has special IT needs. National Library for the Blind and Physically Handicapped, as well as library services. So there are a number of units that require mission-specific IT concentration. The submission for this fiscal year includes staffing for registration to allow the Copyright Office to reduce the number of backlogged registrations and to begin to make that an acceptable number in terms of their workload. The IT modernization for copyright is a major priority, and having not only the staff but also the capacity to have a IT system that supports their mission is one of our major focuses.
What do you think an acceptable turnaround time would be?
Well, shorter.
Right.
Definitely shorter. And in looking at combining the special needs of registration, and because all types of items are being registered. And so that, and also with the electronic registration, and that's a special area as well. So we are working diligently to make sure that the IT component of registration is more than adequate and efficient, and then the human component of registration is being addressed and working in this submission as well.
Okay. Mr. Ryan?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have a couple questions on CRS, so if we can, if Dr. Mazanek,
Officer.
is she? Yeah, I mean, you can come sit down.
Mary
The Special Forces, call them. They are really something.
Ma'am, if you'd introduce yourself to the committee.
I am Mary Mazanek, the Director of the Congressional Research Service.
Thank you. Welcome to the committee.
Thank
Mr.
you.
Ryan?
Got a face with a name now, so we all spend a lot of time utilizing your services. I'm interested, got a couple questions. The junior analyst position
Yes.
that you're requesting, I could see in some sense how this would increase capacity, but I think it also may have the potential to be very cumbersome. So if you can talk a little bit about how this may affect the quality, or will it affect the quality of the CRS product? Could it potentially create more work than it saves? So can you just talk us through what you're thinking about that?
In the budget, we are requesting 8 temporary employees. And these would be entry-level analyst positions to bolster the high-demand areas. And the perennial high-demand areas are healthcare, education, defense, and budget and appropriations. And this will give us flexibility to be able to be responsive to the needs of Congress. It also will allow us to start training people that may eventually join our staff on a more permanent basis. So it's a succession plan too, part of our succession plan. I don't think the quality of the work will be impacted. I think that these individuals would be part of a team, and that they would be working with more senior analysts and to train them and mentor them.
And so I would assume that the senior analyst then would have less time to do the work?
Actually,
Is that a concern at all?
Actually, part of the intent of this is to unload senior analysts so that they can focus on the more sophisticated, deeply analytical needs of the Congress. And these more entry-level positions would be able to handle a large number of the requests along with the rest of the CRS staff.
You were requesting $4 million this coming year and a total of $20 million over the next 5 years to invest in the integrated research and information system.
Yes.
Can you explain in concrete terms what this new system would allow you to do that you can't do today? So let's say a congressional office requests a report on some new defense project or report on benefits for service-disabled veterans. What would be different under the IRIS system from our vantage point, and how we kind of think about this? How would it be different?
So let me start by saying that our current system is a legacy system that is aging. It is highly complex. It was highly customized when it was designed, and it's becoming more and more difficult to maintain, and it is in dire need of being modernized. Technology has advanced since that system was created.
When was it created?
It's been about 10 years. It's a multi-component system. It's our authoring and publishing system. our client or customer management system. And there's also new technology that would allow us to better analyze and do research on large data sets. The current authoring and publishing system is somewhat difficult to use by the analysts who create the content. And we're hoping that as we test out what's available, what new systems could be put in place, and that's actually we're already starting to do that. We are reviewing RFIs, requests for informations, and we will actually demo, test, and evaluate systems this year. It will free up time of the analysts so that they can do more of the analytical work and less on the production and pushing out the content.
Okay. And do you think the 5-year plan, it's doable? You think $4 million a year for 5 years?
I think it's doable. Now, I'm not a technology expert. This proposal, this programmatic increase, was put together in collaboration with the CIO, Bud Barton, who has reviewed it and endorsed it. And so it is also part of the library's modernization plan.
Okay.
If I may
Yeah, of
add
course.
to that, Bud, the general library modernization allows units like CRS and copyright to do is focus on their particular IT needs. And Dr. Mazanoff mentioned that she's working with Mr. Barton, and we have developed, as part of IT centralization, a project management office that will help all units research proposals and look at what their needs are specific to their mission and work with the general IT office. And so that also provides another level of support for them. And this system is one of the IT challenges that the library has, and as was mentioned quite frequently in the GAO report. Copyright and CRS were the two that emphasized the most.
Can I add one more feature of the new system, which is actually a priority of mine, is this new system would allow us to capture our work product and create an institutional memory, so that as staff retire mostly, and roughly about 25% of our staff will be eligible to retire in the next fiscal year, we have the institutional memory preserved.
Makes sense. Yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Ryan. Ms. Lowy?
Thank you again for being here. And I know that all of us are so impressed with the incredible collection at the Library of Congress. And I know you've been very interested in making sure people around the country can avail themselves of these incredible resources. Not everyone can come to Washington, D.C. Can you give us an idea of what you're doing and what you're planning to do?
This is one of the most exciting aspects of my tenure, and really what makes being Librarian of Congress at this time so exciting, because the information technology, the modernization that the library is embarking on that will help improve services. People will be able to, for instance, with the Veterans History Project, that we're developing a mobile application, an app, so that anyone with their phone anywhere can start recording their services. We are actually live streaming programming from Capitol Hill and Jefferson Building and other wonderful programming that the library has that you referred to will be, and we've tested out, it works, be able to live stream to schools and any facility, any public place throughout the country. At the same time, people will be able to interact with us with traveling exhibits. We have plans for 3 18-wheelers, West Coast, East Coast, Midwest, to be able to take the library into communities as well, with interaction with the staff members here. We also are looking at making sure that we digitize as many unique collections that we can. For instance, Teddy Roosevelt's papers and Woodrow Wilson's papers in the next few years because of World War I. So those will be available. We've already started with that. And we are making sure that when we do any programming or think of anything here, we are thinking about how can we get it out to as many people as possible. So we've expanded our education programming, teaching with primary resources, and combine that with the Young Reader Center, which will be expanded as well. So this
How young?
Actually down to 6 months.
You're
Very
competing with
creative.
Sesame Street.
Not quite. Well, we actually have had Clifford, the dog, and that thing. So we're going from the very earliest, we're growing, we want to grow readers and also make sure that people have access to primary resources as soon as possible. We're working with the National Archives and the Smithsonian, so the 3 institutions are looking at ways we can have joint exhibits and joint programming as well. So there's one program called Citizen Archivist. We're expanding it to be Citizen Historian because a lot of young people are not able to read the manuscripts, the original manuscripts in cursive. So we're going to have translations for that and invite people to do that. That's been an interesting aspect of making historical documents accessible, but if they can't read them, that's difficult. For instance, the draft of the Declaration of Independence, we have it digitized, wonderful, but if they can't read those wonderful words. These are just some of the ideas, and they're just expanding all the time.
Very exciting. Just curious, because members of Congress come over there a couple of times a year, and you bring out some of the most exciting exhibits. How many people just walk off the street and say, I think I'll go to the Library of Congress today?
Quite a few. Several years ago, and my predecessor, Dr. Billington, worked very diligently with the architect of the Capitol to have a actual tunnel connecting the Visitor Center, the Capitol Visitor Center, to the Jefferson Building. And we get a number of people that come in from tours and things like that come into the Jefferson Building and the connections that are made there. We just hired a new exhibit director who will work on the visitor experience. And so what will people experience on their way to the Library of Congress and then when they get into the Jefferson Building. So there's going to be quite a bit more of engaging people with that. And then we are reaching out to the public, social media, all types of ways to let them know what the library has already, what they can see online. So you'll be hearing more about, we're not going to be quiet anymore. We're going to let
Thank you.
everybody know.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Ms. Lowy. Mr. Mulinar.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for being here, and also thank you for the tour you gave us a while back, and for the work you're doing. And everybody who experiences the Library of Congress, I think, just has an awe of the work that's being done. So thank you for that. I wanted to explore a little bit with the thought about modernization, and I know the Copyright Office is an area that you're working very hard to modernize, and just wondered if you had some benchmarks that you're kind of looking at where you would say, okay, here's step 1, here's step 2, here's step 3, and you may have covered some of that, but I just wondered if you have kind of a modernization plan in mind for that.
There's a general library-wide modernization plan, and thank you also for the multi-year funding to support that and get that going. The first part, of course, is really strengthening the infrastructure, and that includes data storage and security of the assets that the library has and the capacity. Mr. Barton will get more into the weeds about some of that. The other part, though, in terms of modernization, the IT modernization plan has aspects for scheduling copyright modernization, that's a unit of that, and CRS and their efforts. You'll see in the submission about adding staff for specific IT staff for those types of things. So there is a timeline, and it's being advised as we move forward, but Mr. Barton might want to elaborate that. But there is a definite plan, roadmap. I mentioned the GAO before, and that is also giving us guide points along the way. So it's moving quite rapidly, I would say.
Yes, sir. If I may add, really we're looking at 3 phases. The first phase is stabilizing our current environment. The next phase would be transitioning as much of our production services as possible to what we would call a tier 3 level capability. And what the tier 3 capability does for us is it provides for redundant power and cooling and heating, so that in the event that maintenance needs to be done on those systems, you don't have to bring down your applications and your capabilities to your customers. The next part is really modernizing applications across the service units. We have been very successful over the last several years with Congress.gov and LOC.gov, modernizing those applications using very state-of-the-art technology stacks, if I can use a little technical term there. And that is going to allow us to be very modular in how we develop our applications. I think it's important for us to be able to not position ourselves where we are now, where we have legacy systems that are built on applications and technology that are no longer supported by the vendors that originally created them. So the idea is that we create all of our applications in a manner that allows us to expand, upscale, or even if necessary, when they serve their purpose, to decommission them in a very logical and time-sensitive manner, as well as be able to update the systems at the same time. So pushing forward on the IT areas that we are is difficult, because we're trying to change every aspect of IT across the library, from management to security to project management to investment monitoring to the actual development of software. We're doing it, we're making it all happen at the same time, and I'm very proud of the people who are making that happen, the staff members.
And Mr. Chairman, when you kind of do that expansion and make more things available online, and you're obviously expanding the reach, as you had mentioned, nationally, how does that fit internationally? I mean, can people access
Yes.
resources internationally, and does that compound some of the security issues that you're working on?
Before I turn it over to Mr. Barton, I have to say that in my experience career, IT modernization is something that most libraries share the need for. When you have the world's largest library with more formats than any other library in the world, and unique items. I mentioned Teddy Roosevelt's papers, you have diaries, you have so many, and types of materials to be put online, and it has the specialized units as well. This is frankly one of the aspects of modernizing the Library of Congress that people and other institutions all over the world are looking at, because they know about the complexity of the Library of Congress. And so we are in some ways a model for other libraries and seeing that. So it is complex. It definitely is challenging, but I feel that we have, it's one of my top priorities to get this part of it together, parallel to letting people know about what we have, and that as we create more interest in the library, we are also seeing that there's a clamor for us to put more online, to be available, to not go down, to do all of these types of things. So Mr. Barton has quite a
Thank you.
Quite a
Thank you,
job.
Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Molinar. Ms. McCollum.
Thank you. I'm perfect setup for what I'm gonna ask. Quite often, when we're in the middle of marking up this particular bill, a colleague of ours, Mr. Quigley, has an amendment, and it is to make all the CRS reports available to the public online. And there's been different conversations that members have had around the table, like, well, yeah, maybe it makes sense to have 7 of them, but it should be up to the library what it makes public. And there's actually a group of, I just found a website now, I can't get, the Congressional Research Service reports on conventional weapons. I just found that online. Some scientific organization has uploaded the report. Sometimes you're developing reports specifically for members who are looking at doing legislation, and so there's a confidentiality and a privacy aspect of it. Could you maybe tell, because I'm sure this amendment's gonna come up again, and we have this discussion kind of on the fly usually, but let's pretend the amendment's being offered right now, and I would be interested in knowing the Library of Congress's opinion on it, whether it makes it cost prohibitive, whether it's a security issue, whether it's just something that you, until Congress says otherwise, you think should be internally held.
The library has no opinion about the publication of the reports, and what we're focused on is the efficiency, making sure that we're retaining the level of service to Congress, and part of that modernization effort is to make sure that we are able to serve Congress. And so there are a number of elements in terms of providing that service. You mentioned confidentiality, security of the information itself, and so we know that there are a lot of possible concerns, and we'll be able to provide any information to Congress as you consider all of the elements.
Part of the argument goes, I can request a CRS report on what's trending with Lyme disease. I can request it, I could hand it to a constituent, but a constituent couldn't call and ask for that report. So it's public, but yet it's not public.
And in working, and I spent a number of years in the public library realm, and the Library of Congress, it's in its name, it serves Congress. That's why they're the special forces, and they are specifically referenced and analysts that answer to Congress and Congress's reference needs. There are public questions and reference questions I mentioned in the opening remarks that are
Right.
the public can directly contact the Library of Congress. The CRS is specifically for Congress, so that's why it's a decision of Congress, how much public input, not
Right.
public input, but public product CRS that.
Well, I thank you for that, and I think you draw a good distinction. There's the Library of Congress is open to the public, and they can go on and they can do research, and they can even, request something for a library, whereas CRS is dedicated and set aside to help us be more effective and efficient in our jobs. And as we see fewer staff available to us, as we see your staff being reduced over the years, there's a pressure point in which I think some of us are very worried that you won't be able to do your job as effectively and as efficiently as you would like to. And I'm also a little concerned, and I don't know, I'm probably showing my limited amount of technology, but anytime you start opening up more of your system to the public to easily get in, and documents can be manipulated, things can have accidents happen to them even on the internet. Is that part of the concern as well? You're trying to protect your IT system, but the more
Yes.
people you have going in?
That's also a concern in terms of having, when you have a number of different service units that have different systems. That's part of building a unified infrastructure for IT that helps you lessen not only duplication and waste and expense in terms of basic commodities, printers and things like that you purchase in bulk. It also gives you more security and control when you have all of the units having a basic infrastructure. And the more, and Mr. Barton can definitely speak in more detail about that, the more exposure you have, moving from the tier 1 to the tier 3, being able to have more secure data center helps with our security. So do you want to?
So, Mr. Barton, so right now, if my staff is requesting something with the Library of Congress, all the servers are recognizing each other, that this is coming from one secure site to another secure site? Or,
Right, that's correct. There
that's
are-
kind of scary that I gotta, that I
And-
understand
and
that much, but.
that's- You hit all three of the primary concerns regarding security. The three areas are confidentiality, integrity, and availability. Integrity goes to, is the product what you originally put up there? So if CRS is publishing a report, is that report the same report that they originally published? That's something that if you find it out on the open internet, there is no guarantee that that is the same product that was published by CRS. Availability, that goes to this tier 3 setup that we've asked for funding for, and that means no downtime for the servers. And then confidentiality, that is the point where only people who are authorized to see a specific piece of information see that information. The way that we are designing the data centers and our information structures, our data structures these days, allows us to make those distinctions at several different points within the infrastructure. So I'm confident that once we understand what the owner of the data wants to be made available, we can do that in a manner that makes sure only the people who are allowed to see it, see it.
Well, thank you, and thank you, Mr. Chair, for indulging me in this line of questioning, because we know what keeps coming up.
Yep.
And people are like, well, what's the big deal? Because I can order a report on Lyme disease if you have one, and I can share it with a constituent. And I think sometimes it gets, it sounds too good to be true. Therefore, I think it is too good to be true. So thank you very much for helping me
Mr.
understand.
Newlen, excuse me, Mr.
Oh.
Newlen
Can I just
wanted
add
to
one more
Certainly.
thing? I just wanted to say that the library, as Dr. Hayden just said, is prepared to implement any congressional directive about the dissemination of CRS reports. But what we care most about at the end of the day is that you have confidence in the integrity of CRS reports, the integrity of CRS reports and work products.
And that's why I wanted to have an enlightened discussion where we weren't voting in 2 seconds on it. So thank you.
Mr. Newlen is a veteran of CRS.
All right.
It's a special
Thank you
place
for your
for him.
input, sir. Thanks, Mr. Cullen. Ms. Wasserman Schultz.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Along the same lines with CRS, maybe the director could come back up to the table. I can see the value in raising up the next generation of CRS expertise, particularly because you're about to have such a huge export of your tenured professionals. But in your testimony, Dr. Hayden, you say that you'd be reducing staff capacity in areas that are no longer in demand. How would it be determined what areas are no longer in demand, especially given that Congress is the one that kind of drives your demand?
And Dr. Massenoff can get into more of the details of how they track the number of requests and keep up with what are the high demand areas. And that's something that CRS does regularly, and make sure that, for instance, health, education, there's some perennial topics that they know have high demand, and then they have to be flexible for topics that are more current or that are of the time. And I better turn it over to you now.
Thank you. As was stated, our staffing levels are down 13% since 2010. Now, we have prioritized the analytical capacity in the service, and so the analyst levels are down 8%. We are at the point where, in the current budget climate, where we can't immediately fill behind someone that departs. And what we have done is we have taken their portfolio and reassigned their issues so that there's coverage. We are dedicated to provide the full coverage of congressional issues and process and procedure. We're not looking to eliminate coverage in any area. What we're trying to do is actually reinforce areas that have a very high number of requests and do it in a way that allows us some flexibility. And that's why we are requesting these 8 temporary appointments in the 5 high-volume areas. It would be a temporary appointment for 3 to 5 years. It could be renewed if the demand continues, but it could also allow us to pivot to other areas of congressional focus that need additional support.
If you had your druthers, would you prefer that we give you full-time
Yes.
FTEs?
Yes, I mean, we are
would fulfill
authorized.
the needs that you are currently lacking?
Well, we are authorized for 561 FTEs. Our current budget, our current resources support will finish out 2017 at around 582, 583. And there are areas, I am very concerned that my staff is very dedicated, very motivated. They love working for Congress, but we keep on asking them to do more and more. And we're at a point where I want to make sure that we continue to support the Congress with high-quality work. And so it's coming up with other ways to staff that allows us some flexibility.
So, Mr. Chairman, when I would ask maybe that you consider when you prepare your chairman's mark, this would be an example of where we are shortchanging our own needs by not having the kind of expertise over a long extended period of time at CRS, and continually adding more and more Capitol Police officers. So, I mean, it's a trade-off. Over the last number of years, we have dramatically increased the Capitol Police budget, given them more personnel, and we are shortchanging and causing CRS. This is a good idea, I think, but it is not the way. It's a good idea because they are basically trying to put their fingers in the holes where the dike is leaking, the dam is leaking. And so when you're thinking about the whole picture of the Ledge Branch budget, this is something that we should consider because we've been shortchanging ourselves for far too long, in my opinion. I wanted to just shift gears and ask the librarian a little bit about the Copyright Office. The 2017 Omnibus Report directs the library to defer to the Register of Copyright's expertise when it comes to copyright-specific IT systems and some of the larger copyright issues. Do you foresee any challenges to meeting that commitment?
No. And the policy and the advice to Congress on copyright matters law is intact, and I just want to take this opportunity to thank Ms. Claggett for being the acting register and the work that she has done. She's worked collaboratively, and she has worked collaboratively with Mr. Barton on making sure that the IT modernization effort continues and is strengthened.
Thank you. And what formal direct role does the Register of Copyrights have in the managing of the Copyright Office's IT systems or in planning and implementing any modernization efforts?
The job of the Register beyond the policy is to manage the process, and part of that is to be not only part of a library-wide technology committee, basically, and to have, make very well known the mission-specific IT requirements to the library. And so that we depend on the service units to give the information about what are your specific IT needs and how can we support those.
Thank you. And lastly, I just want to commend you and your entire team on the significant advances you've made in public outreach, particularly for children. I won't bore anybody with the story, but from the time I came 12 years ago to now, there is a dramatically different ability for children to get access to the Library of Congress, and your staff should get full credit for the really excellent job that they've done in taking us through that process.
The Young Readers Center is now open on Saturdays, and we have seen a marked increase in the number of people who live locally that come to the library. We've also had requests for more reference services and connecting to the collections for people under 16. You get a reader's card at 16. People are saying, what about the 12-year-old
Yeah.
that wants to do that? I mentioned the 6-month-old. There's a Friday morning story time as well with the stroller park, and plans now to expand the Young Reader Center to be a youth center with learning labs and ways to connect to collections.
So just so you know, the 5-year-olds that helped cut the ribbon on the Young Reader Center are graduating from high school in 2 weeks.
All right.
Thank you. I yield back.
Thank you, Ms. Wasserman Schultz. Dr. Hayden, thank you for your testimony today.
Oh, thank you.
We're just gonna do, I think, around here, I think pretty much everyone's got a chance to ask their questions. We have votes on the floor, so
Oh.
we're gonna let you off the hook a little bit. But as we work through our deliberations on how to best allocate resources in 2018, your testimony today was very important to us, and we'll continue that dialogue to make sure that we have all the information before us and that we give you the resources you need to do your job. So thank you
Thank
for
you.
your testimony today. Thank you for your service to our country, Mr. Newlen, Mr. Barton, and the rest of your staff. Thank you so very much. And at this time, the subcommittee stands in recess subject to the call of the chair.